Godātie pētnieki, lūdzu ieņemiet vietas. Godātais profesor, lūdzu ieņemiet vietas. Varbūt pirms mēs sākam tehniskie paziņojumi, tad mums ir darba valoda angļu, bet drīkst arī latviski, tāpēc jautājums pēc tam, kad būs diskusija, var uzdot arī latviešu valodā. Tiem, ka ir nepieciešams tulkojums, tur ir austiņas, lūdzu paņemiet tad tehniku. Okay, Excellencies, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad that you kindly responded to our invitation and you are here today for our presentation of book. As you already see, this book, this study is result of joint efforts from two Latvian think tanks. It's Center for East European Policy Studies and Latvian Institute of International Affairs. And I'm glad that also our foreign researchers are here. There is Raivo Vāre and Karmo Tur from Estonia, and Ļudas Danavičius from Lithuania. I don't know, Vadim Volovoi, yes, also. Thank you for coming. And unfortunately, our colleague from Russia is not yet here, Professor Victoria Panova, because of this weather condition, her flight delayed. I remember Zhirinovsky once said that Russia owns climate weapon. Probably this is a case. And she is not able to come yet, but I hope she will come and she will be on the second panel. And in first, I'd like to say thank you to our editor, Professor Andris Sprūts, for scientific guidance, and also thank you for all researchers who took part in our study. And there is also one person who is a reason that idea was born to make such a study, and that is journalist, well-known journalist Aivars Ozoliņš. But yeah, he probably doesn't know yet it, but once he called me and asked for commentaries about one Russian investor. He wanted to buy Latvijas Fineris, company Latvijas Fineris, and maybe you forget it already, but in reply I told you that this is a good idea. We have to make some whole study, like research about Latvian and Russian economic relations. So thank you. This was your idea. And after that conversation, I turned to very good foreign affairs expert Andris Sprūts and Mārtiņš Mūnieks from Sorosa Foundation, and both of them responded positively, and project were started. And as I know, Mārtiņš Mūnieks in these days, he is working in Bucharest for German Marshall Foundation, and he said me that he will watch us in this live internet broadcasting. So probably this camera is working, I hope so. Dear Mārtiņš, thank you so much for your support. And there is also one lady from Sorosa Foundation, Ieva Morica, who continued the role of Mārtiņš Mūnieks, and she was a great supporter for our study. And I know that she's ready to say a few words, maybe even few sentences for us.
Thank you. Good morning, labrīt. With respect to our international guests, I will say my remarks in English. It is an honor for me to be here, and on behalf of the Sorosa Foundation Latvia, to thank and congratulate the following individuals and organizations for successful completion of the book on the economic presence of Russia and Belarus in the Baltic states, risks and opportunities. First, the Latvian Institute of International Affairs and Andris Sprūts personally for richly contributing to the content and drawing out the best from the researchers. Second, the Center for East European Policy Studies and Andis Kudors personally for successfully leading the process and managing partnerships among so many stakeholders. And third, I would like to thank all researchers from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Russia for their intellectual contributions and hard work. Everybody who was involved must feel a sense of great accomplishment. And I was also, as Andis said, I would also like to give a credit to my former colleague at the Sorosa Foundation, Martin Šmūrnieks, who currently, as you said, works for the Black Sea region, and he was instrumental in defining the terms of reference for this project. Regarding the book, I would like to highlight 3 aspects. The study looks in depth at the tensions between values and pragmatism in foreign policy decision-making. It is a fascinating discussion indeed, where it is difficult to draw a line, a clear line on what is wrong, what is right, and what is better for our countries. At the same time, it should not be treated as just fun intellectual exercise. In most cases, beneath theoretical concepts, people's lives and freedoms are affected. Decision makers must strike a very difficult balance between jobs and welfare of their own citizens and upholding the rights and freedoms in foreign policy decision-making. We in the Baltic states should be very grateful to those countries that after the World War II adopted very strong value-based foreign policies. Without this, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania might not be free countries today. Second, this book, in addition to well-known names in foreign policy analysis, has brought together a group of talented young researchers. Thus, it has contributed to capacity building of individuals who we hope will become a new generation of experts. And I also truly hope that you will express your views in public debates and your voices will inform foreign policy choices in the future. And finally, I would like to praise the organizers for bringing together various experts from the region, thus providing a much deeper and regional analysis to issues that cannot be viewed from national positions only. And I'm hopeful that your cooperation will continue enriching the body of knowledge on foreign policy issues in the Baltic states. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And I'm happy that I can give floor to Andris Sprūts, who is editor of this study. Please.
Thank you. Is it functioning? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, friends. It's a great pleasure to welcome everybody here, and of course express immediately my kindest regards and appreciation and thanks to my colleagues, be it in a Center of East European Policy Studies, in a person also of Andis Kudors, and of course with Sorosa Foundation, be it Martin or also Eva. It has really the pleasure to cooperate. I think I heard also the thanks to Aivars Ozoliņš. I didn't know he was on a board, but thanks for Andis informing as well. So it means that the whole project was even wider than probably we were planning and expected. But it's a good thing, very good thing. When I look and when I put this publication in some perspective, then of course one of the perspective immediately comes what has happened in 2012. Even though actually the project has started already some 1.5 years ago, if not even 2 years ago, the idea already was raised and started to be developed. But 2012 has been quite a dynamic year in many regards, and of course elections, be it in France, Russia, United States, have contributed to, you can say, transformative and quite interesting developments in the region, also including in Latvia. I think we have experienced referendum and the political developments, which sort of has as well caused some intrigue. I can add to this that because our first priority is to do research and to do some analysis on those developments which are happening at that year, but of course at the same time try to look from more wider perspective, more fundamental perspective, trying to identify trends and major fundamental, you can say, directions of policy developments. Institutes, and this is, as already I mentioned, is a joint project of two institutes, and I think that this presentation and this book on Russia is somehow a very synergic and natural result of this year as well, which accomplishes a couple of publications. The East Central East European Policy Analysis Institute has done research a little bit paradoxically on the United States, but I think it was very good job done in the beginning of the year. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, our institute came with a publication on Germany, on German role in the Visegrad and Baltic countries. And now, sort of at the end of the year, we also pay a tribute to our major partner, major neighbor, major counterpart, be it in political affairs, be it in economic affairs, of course, Russia, and also Belarus. Let's not forget about another neighbor, of course, Belarus, even though the probably emphasis is stronger on Russia. This shows that this project is the result of fruitful cooperation between think tanks, and it's still intention to develop these cooperative efforts in Latvia, because I think the think tank sector, there are smaller institutes and there is a need for cooperative efforts. I think once more I say my thanks to Sorosa Foundation, who has financially, of course, supported and contributed, and it is really very highly appreciated. And of course, the last but not least, it's the appreciation goes to the researchers, be it already established researchers, be it younger researchers. I think that it has brought together the really talented body of research community representatives, be it from the younger generation or, as I said already, probably from more established generations. And it's not just those, let's say, generational joint cooperation, but also international one. We have on the board Estonians, we have on the board Lithuanians, and we have on the board, but for technical reasons so far not being allowed to land, also Russians. But I hope that Victoria, who has been very integral part and very welcome for our project, is joining us. I very much hope that she will also provide this Russian perspective as well. I think it's very important to have everybody on the board. This was also an intention. With this sort of introductory remarks for the project itself, I go more into our panel discussion. And still a couple of words before I also sort of start this panel discussion and give floor to my colleagues from the project. Still a couple of things. One that of course idea behind this project was a couple of ideas. Already I mentioned, and I will not repeat too much, that it should be comparative perspective, that it should be international perspective, that it should be not just Latvian and Russian perspective. We should provide a wider comparative framework, including this international perspective. So that's why, again, Victoria Panova is very welcome and very highly expected that she would contribute the different perceptions as well, how we approach political and economic interaction between us. I think we discussed a lot in Latvia about political influences, about political relations, about the soft power, but we haven't done too much of research, apart from some journalistic as well analysis and investigations, highly appreciated, but not probably scientific analysis on political economic interaction between the countries, with identifying this, you can say, interdisciplinary elements to this, with identifying different players involved, with identifying also different frameworks which are sort of setting the basis for political and economic interaction. So there was an attempt to provide a comprehensive, interdisciplinary, comparative, if I may use scientific terms, and still, as I say, it's not a journalistic investigation, so that's why probably there will not be some very loud discoveries, but at the same time, I think the scientific element has been the central emphasis and intention of this project. What are the results? And again, sort of not going into the details because already we can identify those in the due course of discussion and also due discussion after the presentations of concrete chapters, but that we of course experience some dynamic. If I provide these general results, that we've seen different dynamic in the recent years. There are some zigzags. There are also some simultaneous parallel dynamics, because if you look politically, then 2012 has not been the most favorable in many regards. But if you look economically, which is to some extent paradoxically, but probably not, economically relations between Latvia and Russia, not only Latvia and Russia, but also Lithuania, Estonia and Russia, actually have developed very favorably and positively, and we can see every year there is increase, for instance, in terms of trade volumes. And this interest in mutual cooperation in business projects, wider economic projects, it is still very strong. So you see that this certain kind of dynamic. I think also one of the dynamic and very symptomatic element was when we discussed sanctions on Belarus in the beginning of the year. As I say, until 2004, probably a little bit provocatively, I would say we even didn't have normal foreign policy, because all of our foreign policy was directed to integration into EU and NATO. But once we have done it, there already the foreign policy is about decisions, and sometimes quite hard decisions, and sometimes about balancing values, interests, economic gains, political gains, etc., etc. And these are not easy decisions. And I think the Belarusian case also was symptomatic in this regard, because Latvian foreign policy and not only establishment had to make some kind of choices what to choose. And as you saw, to some extent, result was a compromise, and it shows this quite mixed picture in terms of dynamic also when you interact politically and economically with our neighbors. Also about the players, these compromises indicate that we have quite a number of players, that actually the foreign policy, and especially foreign economic policy, it involves a number of players, stakeholders involved in the process. Sometimes we like to think that somebody in Russia and Belarus is very centralized and very hierarchical, that there is a very clear system. But as Robert Jervis would say, that this is a misperception, that we sometimes think that we are so complicated, so diverse, so having different levels of interaction and players, and let's say other countries are very, very centralized. Actually, it's not the case. Certainly in Belarus and especially in Russia, there are a number of players, a number of stakeholders, and sometimes there is decisions which are difficult to explain what is the motive and rationale behind it. So this must be taken into account, that there is diversity of stakeholders and players. If I speak about economic interaction, and already I will be finishing here, certainly there is a multifaceted spectrum of different investments and trade relations, starting from, as some would say, elements with soft power and elements of political influence and political implications, ending with very good examples of very good economic cooperation between Baltic countries and Russia, with, again, and Belarus as well, with our neighbors, with whom we are quite destined to cooperate and find common languages on many issues. So the spectrum is wide, starting from, as I say, more risky ones, and that's why also the title of the book, risky ones, and really there are risks involved, but also there are many opportunities, and there are also good examples and good cases. And we will come to this already more in detail in the course. So at the very end, and I will finish with this, that and it was also actually my intention as editor, because we were having debate, should the book has some kind of common message. Actually, a common message from my side was that it's important, of course, to have relations with neighbors. We have to identify our challenges, our risks, and our opportunities. But same time, I said that different contributions from different perspectives, actually also with different normative approaches, what should be done, how we should approach relations with Russia and Belarus, actually also reflects a diversity of, first of all, solutions and channels and possibilities of interaction, but also actually normative, fundamental, you can say, basis, approaches, philosophical approaches, how we deal, what are the major sort of priorities. And I think this book is, in this regard, a reflection of our relations to some extent, as chapters are also diverse, and sometimes even with elements of contradiction and sort of inner discussion within a book. With this, I am closing my introductory remarks, and I am taking my duty, responsibility as a moderator, and I am giving floor immediately to Andrejs Jakobsons. He was very valuable for us because he exactly, this again was intention, not just to speak from political science perspective, because in politics we have this intention, we are a little bit entrapped in our specialization, in our vision of the world, but go beyond and to have economists on the board, because exactly the economic perception, economic perspective, economic approach also reflects what are the general economic trends. And I think it's very important to identify and start with economic trends, and that's what Andrejs Jakobsons was excellently doing in this publication. So with this, I am closing my introductory remarks, and I'm giving floor to Andrejs. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andris, for the kind words, and dear participants, I'll be focusing on one of the chapters of the book that has been just published and the chapter is on the economic dimension of the relationships between Latvia, Russia, and Belarus. So basically, if we go back like 20 years in history and then think about the big economic and political events that have happened during this time period, basically we can say that there is really a full spectrum of events that have taken place. So we started with a breakdown of the Soviet Union, which from economist point of view certainly influenced the trade links between Latvia and the former Soviet Union countries. Then we had a number of other events, and I don't even have a full list here, but certainly Russian financial crisis was one of the big events in terms of influencing the trade flows between Latvia and Russia, as we'll see from some of the evidence in a moment. Latvia was quite heavily exposed to this trade destination. So Russian financial crisis in a way changed the patterns of trade, and this change in the patterns actually has been, I would say, very persistent. We have not really been able to recover, to get our exports to Russia back to that level since that period. Then other events that are listed here are obviously Latvia's entry into the World Trade Organization and then the European Union. Entry into the NATO is not mentioned here, but probably some of you would argue that it does have an effect on the trade links as well. Then, world financial crisis, rising prices of oil, certainly given the trading patterns, areas of interaction between Latvia and Russia, certainly, oil still plays one of the big roles in the trade between these two countries. So that obviously had a big influence on the trade volumes. And finally, I think we end with very recent events. Russia has been on its way to the World Trade Organization for quite a long period of time. So I think last but obviously not least, Russia's entry into the World Trade Organization certainly would, to our mind, would be, if not a game-changing event, but certainly it would help in terms of developing further the trade relationships between the countries. Right, so what kind of previous research has been done on this in this area in terms of economic relationships? I think it was actually quite difficult to find any specific papers on this area. We have had obviously lots of publications in the media about the trends, patterns, and so on. Regarding the studies, I'll start with the second one. Perhaps there was in 1998, the World Bank published a macroeconomic and financial sector vulnerability review. One of the key aspects there was to explore the exposure of the Latvian banking sector to the CIS countries, and actually the timing for this study was quite good because, as you know, later in 1998, the Russian financial crisis took place. So basically, this study lets us understand, so what did we expect from this type of external shock to the economy, and then what were the actual implications of this external shock. Then the other study mentioned here is actually a chapter in an earlier book on Latvia-Russia relations, edited by Nils Mužnieks, whom most of us obviously know. So this chapter, took the point of view of an economist and explored, used some economic models to explore whether there are any political distortions in the trade patterns between Latvia and Russia specifically. And one of the authors actually is here. He will correct me if I'm wrong, but this study actually found no significant distortions in trade patterns between Latvia and Russia due to political reasons. So again, this background, I think I'll move on to talking more specifically about the importance of the trade relationships and investment links between Latvia and Russia. So just to quantify this relationship, we start with some numbers. So in 2010, basically the trade total exports, including goods and services, to Latvia and Russia, to Russia and Belarus from Latvia was roughly 7% of GDP, the same on the import side. I have to say that, year 2010 is more of an exception, because if we look at the trends on the import side, which we'll be able to see on the next slide actually, the situation has been much more stable on the import side, so the importance of trade, so overall volumes have fluctuated between 6 and 9% of GDP over, the last 15 years at least, so it's a pretty stable trade pattern. On the export side, there has been much more fluctuation, partly due to the Russian financial crisis and perhaps other events that have significantly influenced the trade. The other aspect which economists often explore in the context of trade between two countries is, comparative advantage, and then one quick way to look at that is just to look at the export-import ratios by industry, by specific goods sometimes. And I have to say that, again, from the economist's point of view, this story has been, was actually quite predictable and uninteresting. I have to say that, I did some quick calculations on this, and actually, they just confirmed what we already know about the trade patterns. So Russia mostly exports mineral products and metals, and Latvia has a big advantage in the products of food industry. So I think on the first part, at least, we don't expect that this pattern would change in the nearest future. Products of food industry, this might actually have some implications, some relationship with Russia joining the World Trade Organization, so we shall see how the situation develops. Right, so some quick graphs here. So the lines here indicates relative importance of the Russia's, the share of Russia and Belarus, and the total share of the two countries in the exports and imports. So as you can see, I already mentioned that on the import side, the situation has been much more stable, while exports, in particular in the mid-90s, late 90s, to be more precise, export volumes did drop in the direction to Russia quite significantly, and as you remember, during that period, Latvian exporters actually tried hard to reorient towards the EU market, so this drop might not be interpreted as something extremely negative. It was just an adjustment of the businesses here in Latvia, given the circumstances at that time. So then let me move also to some discussion on the investment links between Latvia and Russia. So I have to say, in the book, in this chapter, we focused in the context of investment on just Latvia and Russia investment links, because the investment flows with Belarus were extremely small, at least according to the official statistics. So I think the decision was made to disregard that and focus on the Latvia-Russia investment flows. So if we look at the hard statistics, Russia ranked number 9 in terms of in the country list of top investors in Latvia. What was very interesting is actually that during the 90s, early to mid-90s, Russia kind of expressed very little interest in the privatization process in Latvia. So that was, as we remember, privatization process always seems to be linked with inflows of foreign investment, and Latvia indeed received some of that investment. In terms of investment from Russia during that period, the only big event that we could mention is privatization of Latvija's gada. So that was one particular instance where Russian capital indeed participated in the privatization process in Latvia. Apart from that, I don't think we have very big cases to look at in the context of privatization. Then the slide ends with an open-ended question: is the story complete? So are the official statistics of 3.5 of total investment or 1% of GDP from made up by investment from Russia? Is the story really complete? Do we have some indirect investments, perhaps through the third countries, that has taken place during this period of time? So in a way, this chapter leaves this question open, but I think that there are some interesting evidence which makes us kind of look at this question in more detail, perhaps in further studies. For example, if we look at the top investors by country into Latvia, I think, country Cyprus stands out because it contributes about 6% of the total cumulative investment in Latvia. And, I think for an outsider, certainly it is a strange situation that, this type of small country has a much bigger share of the total investment in Latvia, which perhaps opens the door for certain speculations and, further research as well. This is how it looks graphically. So the line basically shows amount of the cumulative foreign direct investment in Latvia in percent of GDP. So as you can see, it is lately has been down to about 1% of GDP. So in absolute terms, I would say that, this direct evidence is, it provides evidence for just limited amounts of investment. Right, so finally we come to, maybe some specifics here on the top investments, top Russian investments in Latvia, and then perhaps, most of you have seen this list, so maybe we can just, comment on it a little bit, and perhaps some of the other authors will return to this discussion later on. So basically, we can see that which are the key areas for the investments. So the first one, Latvijas trans investment, obviously it is linked to Latvia's geographic positions, as a transit trade aspect is very crucial here. So I think that the pure economic rationale is, you could argue that it is pure economic rationale that drives this type of investment. Ammo plant, that's manufacturing sector, a more specific one. Again, the story probably behind this type of investment would be that, Russian investors, Russian companies are extensively looking at Latvia as the door to the European markets, which probably is, the biggest story behind this second investment. Latvija's gada, we mentioned that. This is one of those privatization-related investments, certainly in a strategically important sector here in Latvia. Finally, the top 5 is completed by 2 investments in the banking sector. And again, I think the rationale most probably is the big importance of the non-resident banking in the banking sector of Latvia. Perhaps again, the Russian investors see this as an interesting opportunity to get inside the EU market and to be part of this two-way banking between Latvia and the perhaps former Soviet Union area. These are the biggest investments. Well, this is just top 5, so we can just go beyond this list, obviously, but right. And finally, a couple of conclusions here. Well, I think some of them are pretty obvious. The first one is regarding Russia's WTO membership. So I think that this will certainly be another step to intensify the trade links between the countries, gives more predictability. So that's certainly a favorable event, which should influence the trade relationships between the countries. The rest of the conclusions are more related to the investment flows. Regarding the recent investments, they are more focused towards taking advantage of the Latvia's comparative advantages, both in the context of being part of the EU market and other aspects as well. The third thing is certainly that we can track the direct inflows of investment, but again, this argument of flows through the third countries into the Latvian economy, this remains slightly unexplored. And I would say, certainly there is some future research agenda for both, political scientists, economists, and journalists as well. And finally, an open-ended question which we'll perhaps try to, I hope to try to explore in this discussion. So what is, optimal mix for, investments in Latvia? So what kinds of investment mixes would we like to see here? Is it kind of a, three-party type of investments, participation of both, Latvian capital, East and West capital in one company? Or so is that the best pattern we are looking at, or are we just, can we come up with some other alternatives in this context? Okay, so thanks for attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Andres. It immediately comes to my mind that there is a saying that there are lies, great lies, and statistics. And of course, this chapter was, I think, in this regard, it's not about lies and great lies, it's exactly about statistics and providing a very good picture of what's going on, at least in terms of hard data. And if you look in this hard data, then it seems that Russia's role, of course, is Russia and again Belarus. I'm a little bit missing Belarus here, but certainly they are two important and valuable players. And that in terms of trade, it's around 6-7% of our exports for GDP. And if you sort of add also that potentially investments, then it's less than 10%. So the percentage, it's not that high. But of course, then already the question was, what is about banking sector, for instance? And there are some estimations that in the banking sector it's around 25%. At least some of assumptions appear. Sometimes there is a Russian capital presence. And of course, also if you look the potential investments from the offshores, and some mention the term offshoreization of Latvian economy, in a sense that of course there are elements of uncertainty and clarity. What is exact size? Moreover, additionally, if you, for instance, take Latvijas gada, with all respect to Latvijas gada, of course, but investments of Russia were made in the 1990s, but it's very low investments. Of course, now if you look capitalization of Latvija's gada, so the percentage of presence economically would be much higher than just take the pure data from the 1990s. But with this, we already start to proceed, you can say, to this more grayish. I am not repeating my statement or my remark from the from the beginning of this sort of remark after Andres finished his presentation. But of course, political things are more difficult to define, more difficult to assess, and here already some also author subjectivity comes into the play. But I think it's also the nicety of this. And with this, still I'm providing also floor to Kārlis. But Kārlis was requested in this project to provide some general framework of relations. What is the basis for interaction, political and economic among Latvia, and not only, but especially, of course, Latvia, Russia, and Belarus. But, of course, since Didzis is putting more emphasis on Belarus, I will ask Kārlis probably to stick exactly with the Russian angle more in detail than with the Belarusian, but please also, of course, mention the Belarus as well. Yeah, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andris. Good morning, colleagues. Yes, I had to contribute to this book with a chapter which would be an overview. Okay. It looks like Veikto is having fun. Yeah, contribution to this book with a chapter which tries to grasp the role of the municipalities and institutions and ministries, and then how they perceive the interaction of Latvian economic interaction with Russia and Belarus. So, how does this work? Okay. So, first of all, the very framework of this research which I was doing was to find the current trends and need for additional streamlining, both in legal matters and in political economic reasoning and in motivation. So in order to find out whether the institutions are facilitating the country's economic interdependence, as the academic term is used, usually interdependence or interconnectedness with Russia and Belarus. Based it upon of course, the document analysis and in interviews. Okay, I'm forgetting this. So very quickly, because most of us already, of course, know the legal framework in which the economic relations with Russia and Belarus operate. So first of all, the EU membership, and since 2004, of course, this bilateralization has diminished. At the same time, the multilateralization on many issues, of course, are put on the EU agenda and dealt with on the EU level. Except for investment protection, this has been quite a crucial point all the time, because the necessity to conclude bilateral investment protection agreements with Russia and many other third countries also in this case shows the example of the fact that the process is still not over. So bilateralism, of course, still exists, but the main two frameworks is, of course, the EU-Russia Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, and the one which is the frozen with Belarus, and of course that's dealt bilaterally mostly. FDI protection agreements, in case of Belarus, Latvia has concluded one. In case of Russia, there were hopes that the cooperation and modernization agreed upon last year in June would bring to the process and result in actual agreement. Russia's WTO membership, of course, will be a new framework which will have to be dealt further in detail. Political position and a dispute settlement. So as one of the interviewees mentioned this, and I just cannot get this out of my mind, so I want to share this especially with you. The saying that the good political relations may not influence the economic relations, but the bad ones can. So in this case, of course, we always speak about the fact that the economic relations keep growing between Latvia and Russia, and in Belarusian case as well, but it's always the question of constantly changing political attitudes, and that sometimes there are some unexpected changes and unexpected trends in Latvian and Russian rhetorics, and of course there's some predictability which it brings with. Major achievements, the main watersheds, if I may say so, of course, is the 2004 and Latvia's membership in NATO and in the EU, which changed the whole legal and political landscape, plus the border agreement of 2007 and ex-President Zatler's visit to Moscow, which was considered as a great success and by some even a restart of relations. In Belarusian case, I will, of course, touch only a little bit. Maybe I'm going to say something which Didzis will not say, but just very quickly, of course, this wait-and-see policy towards sanctions and wait to see what Latvian institutions have been following. Open objections, Latvia has started openly objecting, more loudly objecting only after the recent negotiations about the sanctions, additional sanctions to Belarus on the EU level. And Belarus is still seen as a neighboring geo-economic partner. This is just a geographic location. This is the legacy of the Soviet ties, which puts it in a situation that Belarus basically has to have exit to the waters, and in this case Latvia, as long as Lithuania, of course, are among the core partners. Intergovernmental commissions, this is in both cases, both in Russian and Belarusian case, the most important negotiation frameworks, and many issues, many disputes are settled in these negotiations rather than necessarily in bilateral meetings, other type of bilateral meetings. What institutions, of course, have been emphasizing that in case of they are assisting and monitoring the economic processes, they're not controlling them. They're not necessarily getting themselves involved unless there are situations like it was mentioned already before about Latvijas Finieris, when actually the company itself asks, well, for some political assistance. They bring the administrative assistance and they bring the political muscle. So in this case, of course, the economic organizations, entrepreneurs in this case, they are mostly dealing on their individual basis. Of course, they are always engaging themselves, looking for contacts, and in this case, the state institutions, especially in case of Latvia, which has chosen this liberal approach to economy, which has chosen the approach which is in lesser involvement in the economic activity and especially control of the economic activity, leads to the fact that they basically are providing administrative assistance in most cases. The case of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, is a little bit different, because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is supposed to bring the political dimension always to the economic relations and all the relations, of course, but basically it is diminished to the strategic goods and foreign investment monitoring than actually controlling and legal conclusion of bilateral agreements. It's the Ministry of Economics and Latvian Investment and Development Agency, which is the most involved in the process of negotiations and helping and assisting by providing contacts, organizing seminars and things like that. Sorry, forgot about this thing. Yeah, okay, now I'm on the same page. Institutions and private sector. So first of all, the trend is that contacts are irregular. First of all, the most important thing is that because of this approach of the institutions and because this is all left for the businesses themselves, in most cases these contacts are put in a position that institutions get themselves involved, not on a regular basis, quite on the ad hoc basis. More engagement, of course, happens with big businesses, and this is not much of a secret that those are the big businesses, big employers who are usually monitored and helped to more intensely. Institutions and diplomats, of course, this is very different subject a little bit, but this is worth mentioning that first of all, of course, the personal relations matter, and personal relations matter not only in case of businesses finding their own contacts, but also in case of municipalities or state institutions finding their common ground with a diplomacy or representatives of the diplomatic service. So it's quite curious, but in case of Daugavpils, we always are thinking about the fact that Daugavpils is very exposed to Russia, but in reality it appears that Russia has not been as important partner as Belarusians have been in case of Daugavpils. Some problems which were mentioned, and now I'm actually starting to turn to the conclusions more. In this case, first of all, the coordination problems which come from unclear division of labor. Institutions tend to have overlapping responsibilities, and sometimes some are overlapping, some are just simply missing because nobody fully understands who is the one who is responsible for this. So this additional streamlining it has been always mentioned almost in every conclusions, probably in almost every research which has been done, is that the streamlining is absolutely the core issue. Unhealthy competition, which also brings with the turf wars, sometimes we can address like this, that ministries or municipalities are of course struggling among themselves and on different topics, and who's gonna help which entrepreneur. Limited number of officials is another problem. Sometimes it's usually said that, well, in case of Russia, you can see, or even in case of Belarus, you have administrative sector which is a lot bigger and a lot more powerful. In case of Latvia, of course, the economic crisis and reductions and layoffs in the public sector has affected the fact that not always we have the matching amount in absolute numbers of people who are dealing with that. Anti-corruption measures, audits and control, that's quite a curious thing because it was mentioned that in many cases this limited staff has problems because they have to always work in an environment which the other auditing institutions are where other auditing institutions are they have to spend too much time, as in their words, on proving that they are not doing something which is illegal, or they're just simply not making one company more preferential than the other one. Very quickly, I was warned that I'm taking too much time. Fears and mercantile realists. Of course, the ministries, unlike the municipalities, which tend to seek capital, they tend to seek investments, then the ministries demonstrate actually the concern. The very idea is that if it grows, if the Russian's presence or Belarusian presence or any other country's presence grows in absolute numbers, then the question is if it stays in relative numbers on the same level. Meaning that if really, in this case, one country is not starting to dominate the economy of Latvia. Downgrading of political arguments, that's another issue, especially in the case of Belarus. It was mentioned a couple of times that in this case, well, the political rhetoric sometimes brings a bit more problems than it actually helps solving the issue. So in this case, of course, the depolitization is a very, very important aspect. In case of Russian businesses, what is a few observations is that, first of all, the majority stake. The approach that the majority stake has to be acquired when Russians are investing in company, they want to have a majority stake, and this is very typical for Russian companies. Use of offshore companies, that's quite clear, I mean, and size matters. In this case, of course, the question is whether Latvians and Latvian producers can actually supply Russia with the appropriate amount of goods, if we take into account the size of the market and the production capacity of Latvian companies. Finally, in case of Belarus, the asymmetry is not that visible. Belarus, okay, Belarus then. Let's finish with, okay, very quickly. Latvia is small in human resources, that's in absolute numbers if you look at it. But the problem which I found was that in many cases institutions actually perceive themselves smaller than they actually are. And it's what I'm claiming is that it's not about the quantity. It's not necessarily, one doesn't need a big amount of a large amount of people dealing with issues, as much as it could be, if coordinated correctly, it could be as efficient as a bigger institution. So in this case, this perception of own smallness, and in some case even inferiority a little bit, especially towards Russia, is in my mind a bit of more problem than in this case when we're thinking about many other things. Government assistance is necessary, and this is what businesses have always also emphasized, that sometimes government assistance is necessary, and the state institutions, of course, are trying to follow this. To finish up, national control over vital spheres. This is, if we're trying to answer the question whether those are risks or opportunities, then in my mind it came to the situation that we have to, if we're not, in case of Latvia, if we're not losing the control over the natural resources or natural monopolies and infrastructure, including the IT infrastructure, then in that case it is, in a liberal economy, it's always easier to establish another company which could be competing and doing the providing the goods or services instead of the maybe some companies becoming unlikely, and this is the way how to limit the political influence. Pragmatic relations in this case, it's impulse to outside and not only to Russia, but good relations with Russia is of course the good impulse to the third countries in the world to see that the relations are operating well and that Latvia is a safe place for investments and economic activity. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you, Carlis. I realize that there are difference between just 1 minute and academic 1 minute, so you put different contents. But thank you, because I think it was really also a difficult task and complicated task for Carlis sort of to provide all those frames of interaction and take into account, on the one hand, similarities, which of course exist between Latvian interaction with Russia and Belarus, but at the same time, of course, there are also some specifics, and that's why I really appreciate sort of trying to balance and trying to find a message out of, I would say, quite a difficult task of doing those things. And just to sort of summarize in short, that once more reminds us that we really live that relations, it's not just about interaction between politics and economics, but it's also interaction, institutional one, among different institutions within Latvia, between also the central governmental institutions and municipalities. As I think you made, you can say, a little bit of Freudian slip, the Daugavpils and the Belarusian diplomats, saying that to some extent they're also Daugavpils diplomats, or at least some perception might be like this. Of course, you meant that it's just Daugavpils municipality interacting with potential Belarusian diplomats. At the same time, also there is a different or multiplicity of or diversity of frameworks in dealing with Russia and Belarus. And it's not just about bilateral sort of interaction, but also about World Trade Organization, EU frameworks, etc., regional ones. So they have also, of course, influence on bilateral interaction as well. Before I give floor to Didzis, I'm very happy to have Victoria Panova with us. So technical reasons have not troubled you, and it's really great to see you, and we are welcoming you coming to Riga. So, and of course we'll have you on a second panel. But with this, I'm giving floor for Belarusian angle. Please, Didzis, the floor is yours. And I think you also did more already research into the details about the business interaction. So it was not just the formal governmental structures, institutions, and channels, but particularly about the business interaction and practices already with what we have experienced and been able to observe. Please.
Okay, thank you. Small question: how much time do I have? I think according to the program, actually, we can jump to the discussion. But then, but still, I think it'd be very important just highlight a few things what I did in the book.
I would say 7, maximum 10 normal minutes, not academic ones.
The normal ones.
Normal ones.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. I must apologize, but I don't have a presentation for those who prefer that one. I will do in old school style, which I prefer. Thank you. And I just want to highlight things which I believe and I think are very important in my chapter. So the overriding goal, or the main goal of the chapter, was to understand, examine, and analyze Latvian companies involved in the economic relationship with Belarus and vice versa. So in the first section, I briefly highlighted the following issues: the general economic trends between Latvia and Belarus, the characteristics of Latvian economic policy towards Belarus in the last few years. In the second section, which I believe is the most interesting one, I looked on activities of Latvian companies in Belarus, and including the analysis of all kind of obstacles, risks, and opportunities of doing business in Belarus. And in an introduction, I asked the question: what are the main challenges for Latvian entrepreneurs and companies in Belarus? What difficulties do the companies doing business in Belarus face? And what are some of the success stories of Latvian companies in Belarus? And in the third chapter, in section, I focused more on the presence of Belarusian investment in Latvia. So I'll start with the first one. As you may know, for several years, Latvia's official policy towards Belarus has been reactive and very vigilant, and has largely been determined by EU policy. Up until, in a book I'm using the word now, but I think the best correct word would be up until 2011. Latvia has acted with circumspection and deliberation. Of course, despite political difficulties between the EU and Belarus, Latvian Belarusian economic cooperation has gone its own way. And I just want to briefly highlight some statistics, and I hope that they don't lie, Andres. You said about statistics. And
Yes,
yeah, sure. So while the volume of Latvia's external trade with Belarus is relatively small, it has potential to grow at a faster rate than before the economic crisis. In 2011, the volume of export goods from Latvia to Belarus was 107 million, which is 7% higher than in 2010. From 2005 to 2011, so during the last 6 years, the turnover of exports almost doubled. Despite the financial crisis that started in 2008, late 2008, we can see actually the volume of commodity imports has increased considerably during the last 2 years, reaching 342 million lats. But of course, it's important to mention that perhaps Carlos will not agree with me, but the data presents here that also a strong asymmetry in exports and imports, and as well as urgent need to expand Latvia's foreign economic relations with Belarus. Yes, in 2011, if you look, we can see that Belarus ranked 12th among Latvia's export partners and 7th with regard to imports. Just for you who don't know details, let's say, just mention the main export commodities to Belarus are machinery, transport vehicles, products of the chemical and allied industries. But these data also clearly shows that actually the export and imports policy is tightly connected with the development of a transit and transport and logistics industries. Statistically, also to mention, Latvia is one of the main trading partners of Belarus. In 2011, Latvia ranked 4th by volume for Belarusian exports after Russia, the Netherlands, and Ukraine. So we are a very important partner for Belarus. Jumping over a few interesting facts, which you can of course read in the book, I want just kind of conclude the first subchapter with saying that transit and state-of-the-art assembly plants that take raw materials of semi-finished goods and creates a finished product that is ready for sale have large potential in the long-lasting relationship between the two countries. And perhaps after my presentation we can come back on the discussion about the latest debate about using Russian ports instead of Latvian ports in a Belarusian case, but then that's another question. In second section, I looked, as I mentioned, on risk, on opportunities, and I began with quoting this or stating the facts from Doing Business report, which says that while it's relatively easy to start a business or register property in Belarus, considerably larger problems exist in paying taxes and protecting investors. What is also important to highlight is that is the sectors, and for several years the export of machinery and mechanical appliance and electrical equipment to Belarus has been one of the most profitable business for Latvian companies. Latvian companies such as BM Industrial, Darbas Pārs, Daugavpils factory of locomotive repair, Forma Machinery, IRM, Jauda, the Elgos Engineer Plant Company are just a few examples of companies who are trying to go into the Belarus. Moreover, companies such as Comfort or Z-Lite are also good examples of companies that are increasing their export volumes to neighboring countries. And one of the Latvia's most essential exports to Belarus is products from the chemical and allied industries. And in a book, I describe the latest trends and also the statistics from the experience of Online Farm and Greendex and LMP and Silvanos, which are doing great actually in Belarus. The other field which is doing actually let's say which becoming more important is IT, or information and communication technologies, and as you may know, during the last few months, or actually years, Latvia experienced also the shortage of very good, skillful IT people. Of course, we have these people, but still, what we can see sometimes in many cases that that we get new projects from Western Europe and we give to the Belarus. So that's the two IT people in experts in Belarus. So we are doing kind of IT outsourcing. Wow, that's impressive. Okay, jumping over other facts, interesting and statistics. By the way, you can read about who are the largest investors in Latvia. But kind of making the main summarize, it's very important that we can say that fields of transit and transport provide many opportunities, offering the neighboring country the chance to use Latvian ports. There is actually great growth potential in the relationship between the countries, with the potential to increase the cargo amount and introduce new cargoes. As I said, considering the fact of asymmetric trade relations between the countries, Latvian government and entrepreneurs must work actually together together to further increase export turnover. Besides the areas of transit and shipment, the production of and sales of textiles and IT, and also open up great opportunities for Latvian private enterprises. For instance, I look on some case like New Rosme, Liepājas Papīrs, which has opened a new paper mill in Gome, or New Rosme, which has doubled its capacity in Belarus. But the findings also demonstrate, which is quite interesting, is that it is not fully true that only large Latvian corporations have been rather successful in Belarus. A few years ago, there was, I think, Karnīte wrote in an article that big, large Latvian companies, we don't have multi-million companies, but anyway, those who we have, then they are kind of succeeding, and they are quite successful in Belarus. Actually, a number of small and medium-sized businesses, such as Larmet and Stadsservice, You must see this one, it's amazing. Alarmet and Stats Service have fruitfully operated in the Belarusian market, and in fact, one of the key components of doing business wisely in the long term, as I said, I looked on different companies, and that's kind of outcome, is one of the key components of doing business wisely in the long term in Belarus is exporting niche raw materials. These supplies are far less dependent on the effects of economic fluctuations than exporting end product. Also, just kind of summarizing, notwithstanding the challenge facing...
Sorry, but I really appreciate it, but I think just try to probably summarize in 3 sentences what is really the message, what sort of the major conclusion, because I think the details are very important, and I will just add, I think, speaking of, this is the problem a little bit what we experienced in our papers, and I think not only in our papers, it shows this complicated, you can say, nature of dealing economically, politically with Russia and Belarus. Because once we say that, okay, the relations are this and this, they say, but look, please provide us the details. But when you start to provide details, come on, just give us a message and give us a general picture. And of course, there is this a little bit contradiction and dilemma also for us as authors. But please, just try to give a final message and
the final question, the final sentence.
Final 3 sentences.
Oh, one.
Yeah. One, excellent. It would be more appreciated.
So at a time when, as I said, when most EU member states are politically actually disassociating themselves from Belarus, I believe, and also in the article as I mentioned, the new opportunities actually are rising for Latvian companies. That's final sentence.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm immediately opening the floor. So please for questions or comments. Veikto, please. Probably we can collect a number of like some 2-3 questions, and then we can sort of a little bit try to sort of time is running quickly. Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you for the very thorough presentations, and thank you for a book, because now it's the time for us to read it. But I have a question to Andres Jakobsons, because I think you pointed it out quite correctly that if you look on official statistics, then the situation is as it is, as it was also seen on the slides. But have you, amongst the economists, contemplated about finding really the crux of the problem? Because if you talk on the persons on the street in Latvia, then basically everyone says, oh, Russians own everything, which is a tautology, because you really have to look for the facts. So therefore, if you look from the fact that starting from the 1st of January as of this year, finally we have the mandatory tax and property declaration system, which allows us to finally to have a draw the line. So is there any idea how to find where really who is who behind businesses in Latvia? Have you contemplated about methodologies? Thank you.
Okay, but, I'll take still 2 questions. Ambassador.
Had as one of his conclusions that it was very special for Russian firms investing, that they wanted to have a majority of the firms where they invested. Have you been checking that? Because I've been working now for 15 years in this area, working for Danish firms who are coming to invest. And more I get the feeling that they want to have majority because it's easier for development, it's easier for strategy development and so on. Is it again something because you are more concerned about Russian investment and taking majority, or is it real?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Raivo, please, the last in this first round.
I have a question which is related to Belarus, actually, because during these presentations we also somehow tended to skip Belarus very much, except the last presentation. And apparently the data shows that actually Latvia, for example, being one of the biggest partners for Belarus, the Belarusian respective share in Latvian trade is very low. What is the story behind how it comes so that being very big partner for Belarus, still the amount of the trade is so low for Latvia that it's just a small share?
Asymmetry, what was the thing you mentioned? Okay, so excellent. So for each of the speakers, we have one question, please.
Yes, so regarding the question about the kind of real ownership of enterprises and related things, how to capture that, I mean, in any case, it might not be a very straightforward exercise. I mean, we know that companies are, like in the early 90s, I think we remember that we received, the official statistics showed that Latvia receives huge investments from the United States, and then when you looked at the details, it actually turned out that almost all of it is coming from the state of Delaware, and so I mean, I'm afraid that this might still be a tricky question to answer despite the changes. But I think the only thing in that context we can conclude probably is just to evaluate kind of try to identify which are those third countries which we are dealing with, but to exactly quantify the beneficiaries would be quite tricky, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Actually, you managed to answer the question already in the because first of all, of course, this is easier if we look from the entrepreneur's perspective. Of course, having a majority stake gives you control. In this case, you're absolutely right that this, in case of Russia, it was emphasized maybe a bit more, and secondly, because this has been a traditional trend. It's not a new trend. It has been so far always like this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for a question, and actually a very good question, because yes, if you look on statistics, and then Latvia, of course, as I said, the number 4 for Belarus, but at the same time, if you look on numbers, they are very low. But I think that explanation is knowing about the capacity, and also the companies of Belarusian. How many are they? How many companies are there in Belarus who can kind of export, and also if you look on what is kind of going through the Latvia, that's not so much, let's say, 20% metal or chemical, but then majority is oil products, and that's the answer. Oil products consist of 50%, and if you look on to the transit.
Can I just make a comment there? A comment on that. I mean, the trade figures you quoted, number 3 in Belarusian exports is the Netherlands. Well, clearly Belarus is not exporting to the Netherlands. It's some kind of transit, probably oil or something like that. So you have to look at these things very carefully. I remember a few years ago, the number 1 export destination for Lithuania was Switzerland. Okay, and this was again some kind of oil business which happened to be, which was probably Russian, but happened to be registered in Switzerland. So you have to be very careful with these things.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so the second round of question, please.
Well, there's always a good journalist who is the reason of this book, and there should be also a bad journalist who asks some probably strange questions. At first, I have some remarks, suggestions, and the first thing is that sometimes I just took a quick look through the book, and I see almost no remarks towards, let's say, opinions of some Belarusian experts because I think that I have a feeling that I read a different kind of information what I have, and so my question would be, do you consider some closer cooperation with Belarusian experts in the future? And one probably idea is the idea it would for next research to look at how Russian-Belarusian relations influence situation in the Baltics, because more and more I see that, for example, right now we experience the moving again of the Belarusian, for example, goods going transit to the Russian ports, not Latvian. So, just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, please. Some other questions. No questions anymore. Yeah, please. Yeah, very good.
Dienas business seconds modules. Should the Belarusian Prime Minister be invited to their expert exhibition next week?
Okay. Okay, so yes. Anything else? Yeah? So who would like to comment on Belarusian president and Prime Minister, of course, Prime Minister.
I don't think I'll be the right person who can answer or give. I think it just depends from what is our government position and in this question. And I would like to come back to what you said. I think it's very important you mentioned about inviting also for perhaps for the next time we publish similar kind of book and invite also the Belarusian experts, because in this case we are looking more on statistics and also the Latvian companies doing kind of business in Belarus, and but I think this tip is very, very important. That's just in the next time we could just also invite some experts, but then we must be very careful to get this very objective view, not very knowing the situation that the.
Yeah, I mean, if I may add my own comments, I'm very careful adding comments because I'm using these technical reasons. I am not allowed to go to Russia. I hope that after my expressions about Belarus, I still have a chance not to expand my list. But basically, I mean, conceptually, I think that the dialogue is always better, and sort of the interaction is better than trying to make some walls. But of course, there are political realities. If we speak about relations with Russia, it's not just about bilateral, again, Latvia and Belarusian relations. It's about the European context and potentially sanctions, etc., etc. So it cannot be ignored. Political gestures and signals are very important in this. And as once more repeating, the balancing is very, very tricky, actually. It's not an easy task. But at the same time, as I say, actually, it's a part of normal Latvian foreign policy that you have to balance with your partners, values, interests, etc., but actually also balance and legitimize things domestically between different stakeholders which are involved behind it. That's not an easy. So that's why, to some extent, the visit or not, it's a little bit of hostage or result of several stakeholders and games at the same time. But if we speak of Belarusian experts, I think it's perfect remark, and I would see this probably one of the minor, not the largest, but still a minor elements, if not shortcomings, elements to improve in the future. That's why, as I said once more, we are very happy to have Victoria on the board. The project started as a Latvian-Russian project, and then it started to develop. We decided that we should include more and more sort of the perspectives. And this was perspective from Edijs Bosch. He's not, I think, here. I think he did an excellent job. But of course, you might also ask if the native local Belarusian would provide as well some additional insight. It would complicate the picture because, again, with Victoria, with everything, perfect things, we have completely different statistics, absolutely different statistics on many things. And we were sort of discussing how it can be. So, of course, it even adds to the picture what already Alf mentions, that there might be even if you go in details, you can find more and more these intricacies, more and more complications, more and more sort of contradictions, actually. So also adds also some elements of dilemma of providing the clear message. So yes, but that could be sort of taken into account, of course. So thanks anyway for remark. Eva, yeah, please.
I have a question in relation to your introductory remarks. You mentioned at the beginning the discussion on EU sanctions towards Belarus in spring this year, and we all may recall the loud voices from our industry representatives at that time who urged Latvia's government to be careful in forming its position, since according to the numbers that were presented by the industry, it would catastrophically damage Latvia's economic health, let's put it that way. According to the data of your study, the numbers of trade are small with Belarus. So any comments on that?
I think before I give floor to Andrejs, just the comments from my own side, and again I will be limited to my comments. Yeah, what you mentioned, the data is that even the Confederation of Employers provided quite a wide range of assessments, and they at the beginning said it would be, I think, around 500 million lots the cost of the full-scale sanction as against Belarus. At the very end, the result was 20 million lots. So the scope is also the huge, and how you measure this, and I think Andrejs did even some short, small research on this, how it was also measured, what are the sort of the assessments. But I think it also reflects that it's quite difficult to define precise data, and it's also difficult to define how exactly what is the correlation with what. But of course, the full-scale sanctions would be quite unprofitable, and certainly it would be quite a percentage. What would be the percentage? Of course, it's difficult to say. So at the very end, it's a compromise. With a compromise, nobody is happy. None of those who is happy who invited to have a very strict line and more political line and more to say value-driven line. And of course, also those people are not happy that said that we should just economic relations put in front of everything. Yeah, so this is alive, and it's also the beauty of the foreign policy choices, I think, at the moment as well. And I think this is not the first incident. It might be the first, but it's not the last, certainly. I think that we will be debating this quite on occasions in the future. The question was exactly about inviting potentially the Prime Minister. So this is also actually the part of the same story. But Andrejs, please.
Yeah. Well, perhaps I have to disappoint you a little bit. I don't have any hard numbers on my mind, but I think there's a part of this argument which was misinterpreted is actually, well, there is one thing to look at the overall impact on the economy, overall trade volume, but then again, we know that if you look at kind of bilateral trade links, they are usually quite specialized within several selected industries. Okay, so I would think of this effect being important for specific industries rather than the overall economy. So that would be my quick assessment there. So some specific industries might really see a considerable reduction in the trade volumes, and so that's part of the story there, I would say.
Okay, so I think I will close it here, and I will again probably use this provocative statements that there are lies, great lies, and statistics, but actually I'll paraphrase saying that actually sometimes statistics are quite a tricky things, and also probably these first things what we say about lies. So great lies not always are lies and great lies. There are some general frameworks, some political messages which actually are right as well. Yeah, so the picture is more complicated on both ends of this spectrum. I am finishing this first panel, and we have a coffee break for 15 minutes, and then we continue with international perspective, exactly having the international comparative contributions, including also victorious from Russia. And with this, last but not least, thank you for questions, but thank you to the authors and contributors and the speakers, and please join me the round of applause for them.